really shocking. So here's the next the next couple of quotes are on. I guess I grouped them under the threat of heterosexuality and the promise of homosexuality. So you can tell me if you think this grouping is appropriate given this quote I'm about to read to you. Quote number 1. Sheila Cronin, leader of the feminist organization NOW, which is the National Organization for Women, member of the radical feminist group the Red Stockings, in the National Organization for Women Times in January 1988 said the following, quote, "The simple fact is that every woman must be willing to be identified as a lesbian to be fully feminist." Close quote.
Oh, there's more freedom of choice for women right there.
Let's keep taking their choices away and telling them they're free. That's what it said. That's what this is sounding like to me. I mean, it's like, okay, we're going to take away your freedom to choose whether you want to be heterosexual or homosexual. We're going to take away your choice to raise or even have children. It's like, okay, where does the empowerment start? When is that part starting? Because it sounds like whatever power they may have had up until the civil rights era and the feminist movement in the 60s, those are starting to go away.
And just on that note, Sean, it's very, very important to bring this point up again, is that these are not your crackpot feminists on the sidelines here. This is the National Organization for Women. It is, and I've checked this, the most powerful feminist organization in the West, not just in the United States, but in the West. So for the leader of such an organization to make such a profound statement as that, it's got to tell you this is not just random insanity of a bunch of individuals who just don't like men. This is a massive, heavily funded, an extremely powerful organization touching the lives of millions of women all around the globe. And they're saying this. And that should be that's not just a red flag, that's an air raid siren. And this is why people need to wake up. And towards the end of the show, I'm actually going to share, hopefully give all of our listeners the impetus to stick with the show and listen right till the very end. I'm actually going to give you the secret weapon, which will ultimately, almost immediately remove the power that these organizations have over you. And I'll share with all of my viewers and all of my listeners that profound secret towards the end of the show.
Okay, next quote I have here for you. From Professor Catherine A. McKinnon, American feminist, scholar, lawyer, professor of law at the University of Michigan, teacher and activist. In Toward a Feminist Theory of State, issued in 1989, Professor Catherine A. McKinnon says the following, open quotations, heterosexuality institutionalizes male sexual dominance and female sexual submission, close quote. And this is a professor of law at the University of Michigan, so I can't imagine how her influence in that position shapes young people leaving the University of Michigan who've studied law and who studied in her class to then go out now and create legislation, push for new laws. It starts there. It starts in school where people are being trained and in some cases indoctrinated with these sorts of thought processes, and then leave with a degree, the cap and the gown, and they go off and create legislation, and you wonder how these things occur. How do these things, manifest themselves? Do you have any thoughts you want to add on any of Catherine's on this particular quote by Catherine McKinnon?
Yes, I do actually. Although the quote doesn't say it directly, there's actually, if you notice what's happening in Western society in particular, and it's now spreading to other cultures. And it didn't start with the West, by the way. As I said earlier, we're dealing with a genderless, colorless enemy. This enemy just knows how to show up where it's needed, where it feels it's needed in order to cause the most havoc and damage. Is that you see two things happening in the media. On the one hand, there's this, people are being bombarded with all the sexual imagery. I mean, almost every single ad is selling sex. On the one hand, sex is this abundant commodity that you can pick up from the grocery store. And on the other hand, you've got this big, powerful message saying that sexuality in an institution of marriage is evil. That suddenly this institution of marriage or this family unit takes this massive commodity that's used to sell everything from shampoo to cars, and all of a sudden this massive commodity that everybody loves suddenly becomes something toxic whenever it's in a marriage. And that contradiction should be blatant, but it's not, and this is the crazy thing. Now, there is a known, it's an established fact because I've researched this, that feminism is encouraging promiscuity, homosexuality as a so-called alternative to heterosexuality. Because again, this is just another angle of breaking down society. So, and they're doing it two ways. They're trying to turn sex into a commodity that can be regulated by the government, because prostitution is regulated by the government in most countries. And they're trying to turn this powerful dynamic between men and women into a commodity that the government has ownership over. And that's why it's conducive for their purposes to break down marriage, because then they can take sex and they can sell it to people as a product which they have power over. So if they sexualize it, they turn it into a commodity. They condition people's minds into thinking that this is a product that's being sold by the media. I can't get it within a family. So the more you look at the stuff, the more you start to see all the dots joining.
It starts to incent you into looking at family as de-incented or disincented, if that's the proper term, and absence of family is incented. Now, we can get into all the other mechanisms that look to destroy family, like I've done a number of shows recently on paternity fraud. There's divorce courts. There's family law. There's a ton of money behind separating or pulling a family apart. This next topic is one that I think really got my attention, and if it doesn't get someone's attention, they need to check for a pulse. This group of these two quotes I pulled from a group of quotes that are in your database. I sort of lumped under the mass extermination of men. Now, some people may laugh and say that's ridiculous. Well, listen to this. Sally Miller Gerhardt, feminist, science fiction writer, political activist, and the future, if there is one, is female. I guess is a book or a document that she published in 1981. She says this, open quotations: "The population of men must be reduced to and maintained at approximately 10% of the human race," close quote. What?
When I consider Foschini's advert, and maybe this is an article you could consider putting in the load bar, just on that subject, Foschini, which is a major retail, it's a fashion store in Africa, and they're buying out a lot of smaller fashion stores. They sell women's apparel, they sell lipstick, powders, puffs, clothing. They basically focus on fashion, but they're expanding their merchandise store to jewelry, to all other kinds of lineups. And of course, their target audience are women. And not just the woman between the ages of about, say, 25 and 45. That seems to be their focus. So they're not targeting young girls. They're targeting established women. And Foschini, if you put the article in the load bar, people will know how to spell Foschini. It's quite a, they recently ran an advertisement, because in Africa, or South Africa rather, we celebrate National Women's Day in August. We also celebrate, as the month of August, Women's Month. So and of course the men don't get a day because we're also privileged, you see. I'm being sarcastic. And they ran an ad for Women's Month, and there was this massive poster. I walked past it in the shopping mall in Pretoria, and I was walking on one of the upper levels, and Foschini has this huge exhibit on the upper level, and 3 models are featured on this cover. And they're all brandishing the T-shirts which have the slogan, "The future is female." And I was so shocked when I saw this. I actually walked in and I had a chat with the store manager. I wasn't hostile. I just said to her, "Look, do you actually know where the slogan comes from?" And I mentioned the quote that you've just quoted. And I said, "They've taken out the middle portion, but it's exactly the same ideology. And even if you didn't know the history, don't you think it's shocking that so many women, yourself included, will look at that and not even bat an eye? And these are women that are actually decent. They're not bad people. They're probably loving mothers." And this is why I go back to what I said, and sorry to repeat myself, but I'm going to sound like a stuck record. Women are not the enemy. Men are not the enemy. These kinds of slogans are designed to slip below the radar of critical thought, and they're designed to rewire your brain. Because if you see that slogan often enough, you're eventually going to internalize it, and you won't even know you're doing it. I mean, you can be a normal, loving mother, and you can be driving on the road, and there'll be a male driver that cuts you off, and all of a sudden, you'll turn into another person. There's science behind that. So that's that Foschini article will be a very powerful read, and it will actually show you that that is not a forgotten ideology.
The next quote here in that group of the mass extermination of men was made by Professor Mary Daly, feminist philosopher, academic, theologian, in an interview with Susan Bridle called No Man's Land, Enlightened Next magazine in the fall-winter of 1990. Be a decontamination of the earth. I think that this will be accompanied by an evolutionary process that will result in a drastic reduction of the population of males, closed quote. Again, another, this person's a professor. They're not, like you said, just some wacko living in a basement who got turned down by 3 guys and decided I hate all men. This is somebody who teaches people. She's a philosopher and an academic and a theologian.
Wow, I was just thinking about that. Theologian, wow. How's that for the ultimate patriarchy?
Right.
Wow. And
to think this person, I don't know what theology, what brand of theology this person was teaching, but I don't know any brand of theology that teaches that and has a congregation that says that makes sense, thumbs up.
Just on that note, the Foschini group's advertising, my email, my letter, I actually sent it directly to the CEO, and I said, I've looked at your company profile. Guess what, chaps and chapettes? Of the 19, executive board members, only 3 of them are female. Now, what gives? Feminism keeps telling us, when men are in charge, we oppress women. But if you go behind all of these organizations, they're all being funded by the patriarchy. Isn't that fascinating?
Yes, the patriarchy, the mystical, magical patriarchy. And by the way, when you figure out when the patriarchy meetings are, can you let me know? Because I keep missing the memo.
And please tell me, can somebody please tell me how to activate my male privilege membership card? Because for the past 39 years, I haven't been able to figure it out.
It hasn't worked. And mine, it keeps getting this decline when I swipe it. So if you enjoyed the show and want to see more, join our Facebook page called The Man Cave by Gentlemen United. All of our shows, tons of additional content, and invitations to future shows are posted there. You can add to the conversation and suggest future discussion topics. Please like, comment, share, and most of all, subscribe by clicking the Gentlemen United icon. I promise it's free. Thanks again for joining us in The Man Cave.
Enjoyed the show? Like, share, and subscribe. And thanks for joining us in The Man Cave.